He first saw her serving coffee to millionaires who barely glanced at her face. She saw him soaking wet, exhausted, apparently without a penny to his name. What Angel didn't know was that this backpacker owned everything, including her fate. What he didn't expect was that this waitress's kindness would completely disarm him. Between accidental touches, whispered confessions, and one night when everything changed, a love forbidden by secrets was born. And when the truth exploded, it was already too late to go back to being strangers. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and become a member to get early access to upcoming stories. And if you felt it was really worth listening to, also click the super thanks button. Your gesture makes all the difference and helps us keep bringing stories that move you. The rain fell in sheets that afternoon, turning Fifth Avenue into a river of umbrellas and hurried footsteps. New York wore its autumn like a gray coat, heavy, relentless, beautiful in its chaos. Inside the Evergreen Café, the atmosphere was a world apart from the storm outside. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble tables, where executives closed deals over espresso and socialites laughed behind perfectly manicured hands. The air smelled of freshly ground Brazilian coffee beans mixed with the subtle sweetness of vanilla from the pastries displayed behind glass, like precious jewels. Angel wiped down the counter for the third time that hour, her fingers wrinkled from hot water and soap. She'd been working at the Evergreen for 6 months, long enough to recognize the patterns, the way certain customers snapped their fingers instead of making eye contact, how they left their empty cups wherever they pleased, expecting invisible hands to clean up after them, long enough to feel the weight of disdainful looks when she approached their tables. She was 24, with eyes the color of warm honey and dark hair she kept pulled back in a practical bun that never stayed completely in place. There was something about Angel that didn't quite match the Evergreen's polished aesthetic. Maybe it was the small hole in her black work pants that she'd carefully stitched up, or the way her smile remained genuine even after 8 hours on her feet. She carried kindness the way some people carried designer handbags, effortlessly without thinking about its value. The door chimed, and a gust of cold wind rushed in, bringing with it the smell of wet asphalt and autumn leaves. Angel looked up and felt her breath catch, not from attraction but from concern. The man who walked in looked like he'd been wandering through the storm for hours. His backpack hung heavy on his shoulders, dripping water onto the pristine white floor. His jeans were soaked through, clinging to his legs, and his jacket, some beat-up windbreaker that had seen better days, was plastered against his body. Dark hair stuck to his forehead, and when he looked around the cafe, there was something in his eyes that Angel couldn't name. Exhaustion, maybe, or loneliness disguised as independence. She watched heads turn. A woman in a cream-colored suit actually recoiled, pulling her Hermes bag closer as if poverty might be contagious. 2 men in tailored shirts exchanged glances and knowing smirks, that kind of silent conversation that said, "What's someone like that doing here?" The manager, Thomas, a thin man with a perpetually pinched expression, started moving toward the entrance, his intention clear in the tension of his jaw. Angel had seen this before. She'd watched Thomas escort a teenager out once, simply because the kid sat down without ordering something immediately. Something in Angel's chest tightened. She didn't think. She just moved. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cutting through the comfortable murmur of judgment that had settled over the nearby tables. She walked toward the man with the backpack, and as she got closer, she noticed details the others had missed. The quality of his watch partially hidden by his wet sleeve. The way he carried himself despite his disheveled appearance, straight back, taking everything in with an intelligence that seemed to catalogue and understand in seconds what most people took hours to see. "You look like you could use something warm," Angel said, her smile kind and completely without pity. That was important somehow, she didn't know why, but she knew instinctively that this man would hate pity. "Coffee? It's on me. You can sit wherever you'd like." Melvin Ashford, though she didn't know his name yet, looked at her with an expression that made her pulse quicken. It wasn't attraction, not exactly. It was recognition, as if he'd been searching for something and had just found it in the most unexpected place. "You don't have to do this," he said, and his voice was deeper than she'd expected, rough around the edges like well-worn leather. "I know," Angel replied. already moving toward the counter. "But I'm going to anyway." "Cappuccino, Americano? We make an amazing hot chocolate if you're not a coffee person." Behind her, she could feel the stares. Thomas was hovering uncertainly, clearly torn between his instinct to protect the cafe's image and the fact that Angel, one of his few employees who never missed work and actually seemed to care about the customers, was handling the situation. "Cappuccino," Melvin said quietly, setting his backpack down beside a table near the window. Water pooled underneath it immediately. "Thank you." Angel made the drink herself, taking her time, creating a small heart in the foam the way she'd taught herself from YouTube videos during her lunch breaks. Her hands moved with practiced precision, but her mind was racing. There was something about him, the way he sat absolutely still, watching the rain streak down the window. The way his fingers, long, elegant, not the hands of someone who was struggling, curved around the warm cup when she brought it to him. "First one's free," she said with a wink. "The second one, you buy me dinner." The joke slipped out before she could stop it, and she felt her cheeks flush. Where had that come from? She wasn't a flirt. She barely had time for dates between work and taking care of her grandmother. But Melvin smiled, actually smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "Seems like a fair deal," he said, and something in his eyes made her stomach flip. She should have walked away then, should have returned to her tables, her responsibilities. But she stayed, wiping down the already clean table beside him. "Long day?" she asked. "Long life," he replied, then seemed to catch himself. "Sorry, that was darker than I meant it to be." "No, I get it." And she did. Angel understood that kind of tiredness that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. Sometimes the weight isn't in your backpack, it's just in everything else. Melvin looked at her then, really looked, and Angel felt exposed in a way she'd never experienced, like he could see past the cheerful exterior, past the rehearsed smile, straight into the parts of her that wondered if she'd still be serving coffee at 40, if her dreams of opening her own bookstore cafe would always be more than fantasies she cultivated during her subway commute. "What's your name?" he asked. "Angel." "Fitz," he said softly, and there was no sarcasm in it. Just observation, just truth. She wanted to ask his name, wanted to pull up a chair and talk to this stranger who looked at her like she mattered, like she was more than just the help. But Thomas was clearing his throat pointedly, and there were other customers, and reality had a way of reasserting itself even in moments that felt suspended in time. "I should get back to work," she said reluctantly. "Will you be here tomorrow?" Melvin asked, and there was something almost vulnerable in the question. "Every day except Sunday," Angel replied. "Someone needs to make sure people remember their manners in this place." She walked away, feeling his eyes on her back, feeling the weight of something shifting in the air between them. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Melvin Ashford owned this cafe, owned the building it was in, owned half the block, actually. He was testing something, or maybe testing himself, trying to understand if there was anyone left in this city who saw people instead of price tags. And Angel, with her kind eyes and her second-hand shoes and her generous heart, had just answered a question he'd been asking for years. As Melvin sat there, watching her move between tables with natural grace, he felt something dangerous beginning to take root. Something that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with the way she'd looked at him, not as a problem to be solved or a curiosity to pity, but as a human being worthy of warmth on a cold day. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, in a cafe where luxury was measured in price tags and appearances, something priceless had just been offered freely, and neither of them would ever be the same. Melvin came back the next day, and the day after, and the day after that, always with the same worn backpack, always in clothes that looked like they'd been chosen without a second thought, always seeking out the same table by the window where the afternoon light came in at golden angles, turning the dust in the air into glittering particles that danced like tiny stars. Angel started waiting for him. Not that she admitted it to herself at first. It was just, well, she noticed when he came in. Noticed the smell of rain he brought with him even on sunny days, as if he carried a piece of the storm wherever he went. Noticed the way his eyes searched for hers immediately, as if he needed to confirm she was still there, that their first meeting hadn't been some kind of gentle hallucination. On the fourth visit, she had his cappuccino ready before he even ordered. "You're spoiling me," Melvin said, but there was a smile at the corners of his mouth, the kind of smile someone gives when they're happy to be seen, to be remembered. "It's my job," Angel replied, but they both knew that was a lie. Her job was to serve coffee. This extra care, this attention to detail, the way she'd memorized that he liked 2 sugars and preferred his cup piping hot, this was something else entirely. She wiped down the counter, but her eyes drifted to him. She watched the way he drank his coffee, as if each sip was something rare and valuable, not just caffeine to wake up. There was reverence in his gestures, an appreciation that no one else in the cafe seemed to have. The other customers gulped down their espressos like fuel, checking expensive watches between sips. Melvin savored. "Can I sit?" she asked during a lull in the rush, holding a cleaning cloth as an excuse, as if she were actually going to clean the table beside him and not just looking for a reason to stay close. "Please," he said, and the word carried a weight that made her tremble inside. Angel sat down, the cloth still in her hands, her fingers nervously working the fabric. Up close, she could see details she'd missed before, small lines around his eyes that spoke of laughter or worries, maybe both. The shadow of stubble that gave him a careless air that oddly contrasted with the intensity of his gaze. And his hands. God. His hands were beautiful, with long fingers and clean nails, hands that looked capable of building things or destroying them with equal precision. "Do you always work this hard?" Melvin asked, tilting his head slightly, studying her the way she studied him. "I have to," Angel answered simply. "My grandmother, she needs medication. And I have dreams that cost money." "What kind of dreams?" And then Angel found herself talking, words pouring out like water from a dam that had finally broken. She told him about the bookstore Café that lived in her head, a place where people could come and feel welcome, regardless of how much money they had in their pockets. Walls lined with old books that smelled of paper and possibilities, mismatched tables found at thrift stores, each with its own story. Good, honest coffee at prices that didn't require people to choose between eating and reading. It would be a place where no one would be judged by their appearance, she said, then blushed, realizing the implicit reference to their first day. A place where everyone matters. Melvin listened like every word from her was music. His eyes never left her face, and Angel felt something warm in her chest, something dangerous and wonderful at the same time. "That's beautiful," he said finally, and his voice was rough in a way that made her skin tingle. "The world needs more places like that. More people like you." Their hands were on the table, his around the cup, hers still holding that damn cleaning cloth. And then it happened, so simple, so devastatingly simple. Their fingers touched when she reached to adjust the cup, a movement so natural that neither of them planned it. The touch lasted maybe 2 seconds, maybe less. But Angel felt like something electric had passed through her skin, traveling up her arm, straight to her heart that was suddenly beating too fast. She looked down at where their skin touched and saw he was doing the same. When their eyes met, there was a question there, a question neither of them knew how to ask out loud. Angel pulled her hand back, but the warmth remained, like a phantom fingerprint burning on her skin. "Sorry," she murmured, though she wasn't sure what she was apologizing for. "Don't apologize," Melvin said, and there was something in his voice that made her look up again. "Never apologize for kindness, Angel. The world tries to teach people to be hard, closed off. You're different." "Different is usually code for weird," she tried to joke, but it came out weak. "Different is code for rare," he corrected, "for precious, for the kind of person who makes others want to be better." The air between them grew thick, heavy with unspoken things. Angel could hear the barista calling out orders in the background, the sound of cups clinking, other customers' conversations blending into an indistinct murmur. But all of it seemed distant, as if she and Melvin were in a bubble separate from the rest of the world. "I should," she started, gesturing vaguely toward the counter. "I know," Melvin said, but neither of them moved. In the days that followed, something shifted. Melvin's visits became the anchor of Angel's day. She caught herself checking the clock, counting the hours until the moment he usually showed up. 3:15, almost always. He'd walk in with that backpack, that small secret smile that seemed reserved just for her. and somehow the entire cafe would get brighter. They talked about everything and nothing. He asked questions about her life, and Angel, who usually kept her thoughts to herself, found herself opening up like a flower in the sun. He wanted to know about her childhood, her fears, what made her laugh, and she wanted to know the same things about him. But Melvin was more guarded, offering crumbs of information that Angel collected like treasures. He'd traveled a lot, that much she knew, had seen places that Angel only knew through books. But there was a sadness in his stories, a loneliness he tried to hide behind carefully chosen words. One afternoon, when the light was particularly golden and the cafe was nearly empty, Melvin grabbed a napkin and started drawing. Angel watched, fascinated, as simple lines transformed into a small cafe with an attached bookstore, exactly as she'd described. "Would it be like this?" he asked, pushing the napkin toward her. Angel looked at the drawing, at the details he'd included. The large windows, the floor-to-ceiling shelves, even a small fireplace in the corner. He'd listened, really listened, to every word she'd said. "It's perfect," she whispered, feeling tears prick her eyes. When she looked up, Melvin was watching her with an intensity that stole the air from her lungs. There was something in his eyes, desire maybe, mixed with tenderness, and something deeper she couldn't name. "Angel," he began, and the way he said her name made something melt inside her. Table 5 needs cleaning," Thomas shouted from across the cafe, shattering the moment like glass hitting the floor. Angel blinked, snapping back to reality. "I have to go." But as she walked away, carefully tucking the napkin into her apron pocket, she could feel his eyes on her back. And when she turned one last time before disappearing into the back of the cafe, he was still watching, with an expression on his face that made her heart squeeze. Something was growing between them, something that couldn't be contained by coffee cups and polite conversation, something dangerous and inevitable, like a tide that can't be stopped from rising, and they both knew, though neither had the courage to say it out loud, that it was already too late to turn back. Their routine turned into ritual. Melvin showed up every afternoon at 3:15, like a Swiss watch that Angel had learned to synchronize with the beats of her own heart. She started smiling before she even saw him walk through the door, as if her body recognized his presence before her eyes confirmed it. Thomas had stopped frowning at the backpacker after the second week. Maybe because Melvin always left generous tips, too generous for someone who was supposedly traveling on a tight budget, or maybe because even the strictest manager could sense that something was happening there, something too delicate and precious to be interrupted by petty prejudices. It was a Thursday when everything shifted again. The cafe was busier than usual, with a business meeting taking up 3 tables in the center and a group of tourists taking photos of the exposed brick walls and vintage chandeliers. Angel was running from table to table, her apron stained with coffee, a strand of hair escaping from her bun and falling across her sweaty face. Melvin watched her from his usual spot, and there was something in his eyes, concern mixed with admiration, as he saw her work tirelessly, always with that kind smile even when customers were rude or impatient. When there was finally a break in the chaos, Angel practically collapsed into the chair across from him, letting out a long, tired sigh. "Days like this make me question my life choices," she said, but she was smiling. Melvin pushed his cappuccino, still hot, still untouched, toward her. "Drink it. You need it more than I do." Angel took the cup, her fingers brushing his again, and this time neither of them pretended it was an accident. The touch lasted a second longer, 2, 3. Their eyes met across the table, and Angel felt that familiar warmth climbing up her neck, coloring her cheeks pink. "Thank you," she murmured, bringing the cup to her lips. The coffee was perfect, as always, and she closed her eyes for a moment, savoring not just the drink but the kindness behind the gesture. When she opened her eyes, Melvin was leaning slightly forward, elbows on the table, watching her with that intensity that made her feel completely seen. "Tell me what makes you happy," he said suddenly. "Besides the bookstore dream. I want to know the small things, the things that make you smile when no one's looking." Angel thought for a moment, turning the cup between her hands. "Old books," she began, "that smell of aged paper and lived stories, walks in the park when the leaves are changing color, hot chocolate with marshmallows when it's raining." My grandmother laughing. She has this laugh that sounds like bells ringing. Angel paused, biting her lip. And lately, it's these conversations. With you. The last words came out in a whisper, so low she wasn't sure if he'd heard. But from the way his eyes softened, how his lips curved in that small, devastating smile, she knew he had. Tell me about your dreams, Angel said, turning the tables on him. The real ones. Not what you think you should want, but what you actually want. Melvin was quiet for a long moment, and Angel saw something pass across his face. A shadow, an old pain he carried like an invisible weight. I want, he began, then stopped, as if weighing each word. I want to wake up in the morning and not feel alone. I want conversations that matter. I want to look at someone and know they see me, not what I own, not what I can give, but who I am. The imperfect, broken person trying to figure out how to be better. He looked directly at her. I want what I feel when I'm sitting at this table with you. The air left Angel's lungs in a shaky breath. The cafe continued loud around them. Voices, laughter, the hiss of the coffee machine. But everything sounded muffled, distant, as if she and Melvin were underwater in their own silent, suspended world. Melvin, she began, but didn't know how to finish the sentence. He extended his hand across the table, palm up, an offer and a question at the same time. Angel looked at that hand, strong, elegant, trembling slightly, and then placed hers in it, their fingers intertwined, and it was like completing a circuit. Angel felt warmth spread from the point where their skin touched, traveling up her arm, filling her chest, making her heart beat so hard she was sure he could hear it. I shouldn't, she began. Why not? He asked gently. Because I'm a waitress who can barely pay rent. Because you're... So she gestured vaguely, trying to find words for the way he carried himself. The quality of his watch, the small details that didn't match the story of the broke backpacker. I'm what? Melvin asked, and there was something cautious in his voice now, something bordering on fear. Different, Angel said finally. You're different from anyone I've ever met, and that scares me a little. You scare me too, Melvin admitted, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm, sending shivers down her spine. You scare me because you make me want things I thought I'd given up on. You make me believe that maybe there's still genuine kindness in the world. There always was, Angel said softly. You were just looking in the wrong places. They stayed like that for a time that could have been minutes or hours, hands clasped across the marble table, eyes locked on each other, the world spinning around them without importance. It was Angel who finally broke the silence. Go out with me, she said suddenly, the words tumbling out before her courage could fail. Not here. Not at the cafe. Let me show you my New York. The real version, not the postcard version. Melvin's eyes lit up. When? Saturday, she said. My only day off. We can, I don't know, do normal people things. Things that don't cost much money but that are real. I would love that, Melvin said. And there was so much sincerity in his voice that Angel felt tears prick her eyes. On Saturday, Angel met him at the park entrance. He was wearing the same simple clothes as always, the backpack on his shoulders, but there was a lightness in his bearing that she hadn't seen before. When he saw her, his entire face transformed, like the sun rising. They walked for hours. Angel took him to a small street market, where they bought cheap coffee from a vendor who knew her by name. They sat on a park bench eating pretzels and watching street performers. She showed him her favorite second-hand bookstore, a cramped place that smelled of mildew and magic, where books were 50 cents each. Melvin touched everything with reverence, the worn spines of books, the rough surface of the park bench, the greasy paper of the pretzel. It was as if he were memorizing the world through touch, cataloguing each texture, each sensation. Are you happy? Angel asked as they walked along the river's edge, the sun beginning to set and paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Happier than I've been in years, Melvin replied, and then he did something that stopped her heart. He took her hand as they walked, intertwining their fingers as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Angel looked at their joined hands and felt something shatter and rebuild inside her at the same time. This was dangerous. This was going to hurt when it ended. But in that moment, With the sun setting and his hand warm in hers, she couldn't bring herself to care. "Thank you," Melvin said softly. "For what?" "For reminding me what it's like to be human." They stopped there, at the river's edge, the world moving around them in a blur of colors and sounds. And when Melvin turned to her, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with infinitely gentle fingers, Angel felt her breath catch. "You're extraordinary," he whispered, "and I don't know what I did to deserve these moments with you, but I'm grateful for every second." Angel blushed, her heart thundering in her chest. She wanted to say so many things. That she was grateful, too, that these moments were the brightest of her life, that she was starting to feel something deep and frightening every time she looked at him. But the words stuck in her throat, so she just squeezed his hand a little tighter, and in that shared silence something changed irrevocably between them, something with no turning back. The following weeks unfolded like pages of a book Angel never wanted to finish reading. Melvin became part of the fabric of her days, not just the afternoons at the cafe, but text messages in the morning wishing her good day, late-night phone calls when neither could sleep, impromptu meetings that stretched until the stars appeared in the New York sky. Angel taught him to live on little, not because he needed to, though she still believed he was just a traveler careful with money, but because there was a special joy in finding beauty in simple things, and she wanted to share that with him. They clipped coupons together at her small kitchen table, laughing when they found absurd discounts for products no one really needed. Melvin held each coupon like it was treasure, studying it with a comic seriousness that made Angel laugh until her cheeks hurt. 20% off cat food, he announced solemnly. "That's useful." "We don't have a cat," Angel pointed out, trying not to laugh. "Not yet," Melvin replied with that corner-of-mouth smile that made her stomach do flips. "But when we do, we'll be prepared." The word "when" hung in the air between them, an unspoken promise of futures, of something permanent, of an us that extended beyond that moment. They had picnics in Central Park, with cheap boxed wine and sandwiches that Angel made with day-old bread bought for half price. Melvin always insisted it was the best meal he'd ever had, and the way he savored each bite, as if he were tasting something prepared by a Michelin-starred chef, made Angel believe he really felt that way. One afternoon, lying on an old blanket under a huge oak tree, Angel turned on her side to look at him. Melvin had his eyes closed, a soft smile curving his lips. The sun filtered through the leaves, creating patterns of light and shadow on his face. "What are you thinking about?" she asked quietly, almost afraid to break the peace of the moment. Melvin opened his eyes, turning his head to meet her gaze. "I'm thinking that I've never been as happy as I am when I'm wasting time with you." "Wasting?" Angel raised an eyebrow. "Wasting," he confirmed, reaching out to trace the line of her jaw with fingers that trembled slightly. "In the good sense, the sense where time doesn't matter, because every second is worth more than anything I could be doing anywhere else." Angel felt tears prick her eyes, but blinked them away. "You have a way of saying things that completely undo me," she whispered. "Good," Melvin murmured, his thumb tracing the outline of her lower lip. "Because you undo me too. Every day. In all the best possible ways." They stayed like that, looking at each other, the world reduced to the space between their faces, to shared breath, to the warmth radiating between their skin without completely touching. It was Angel who closed the distance, leaning forward until her forehead touched his. It wasn't a kiss, not yet, but it was intimate in a way that made her heart race. She could feel his breath on her lips, could count each eyelash, could see the little golden flecks in his brown eyes that she'd never noticed before. "Angel," Melvin whispered, her name like a prayer, like a confession. "Yes, he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. "I'm falling in love with you. I know it's too soon to say this. I know I'm probably going to scare you, but I can't keep it in any longer. You need to know." The world stopped. Angel felt like her heart had forgotten how to beat, like her lungs had forgotten how to breathe. She looked at this man, this stranger who was no longer a stranger, this backpacker who somehow carried more depth in his eyes than anyone she'd ever known, and knew she was completely lost. "Me too," she whispered back. "I'm falling in love with you too, and it's terrifying and wonderful, and I don't know what to do with it." "Don't do anything," Melvin said, his hand sliding to the back of her head, fingers tangling in her hair. Just feel it. Just stay here with me. They kissed there, under the oak tree, with the afternoon sun warming them and the sound of the city in the distance like a distant soundtrack. It was a soft kiss, exploratory, full of promises and unasked questions. His lips were soft and firm at the same time, moving against hers with a tenderness that made her tremble. Angel sank into him, her hand rising to rest on his chest where she could feel his heart thundering under her palm, wild and fast, matching hers. It was comforting to know he was as affected as she was, that this wasn't one-sided, that the feeling growing between them was mutual and powerful and real. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing heavily, goofy smiles plastered on their faces. "That was," Angel began. "Not entirely appropriate for a public park," Melvin offered with a mischievous gleam in his eyes. Angel laughed, burying her face in his chest. He smelled of coffee and something musky that was uniquely his, a scent she knew would be etched in her memory forever. They walked through the streets of New York laughing like teenagers, fingers intertwined, stopping to look at shop windows where they couldn't afford anything, making up elaborate stories about the people passing by. Melvin was surprisingly creative, building entire narratives about strangers. The woman with the dog was obviously an international spy. The man in the suit was actually a superhero in disguise. "What about that one?" Angel pointed to an elderly woman feeding pigeons. "Ah, her," Melvin said solemnly. "She's the real ruler of New York. The pigeons are her spies. She knows everything that happens in the city." "Everything?" Angel asked, playing along. "Everything," Melvin confirmed. "Including that I'm completely in love with a waitress who has the most beautiful heart I've ever seen." Angel blushed furiously, lightly swatting his arm. "Stop." "Never," he said, pulling her closer and kissing the top of her head. There was a moment, a few weeks later, that would be etched in Angel's memory forever. It was raining, a fine drizzle that wasn't exactly rain but left everything damp and glistening. They were running down the sidewalk toward her apartment, laughing completely soaked. Melvin stumbled on a crack in the concrete, and Angel caught him by the arm, steadying him. They stopped there, in the rain, looking at each other with clothes clinging to their bodies and hair dripping. And then Melvin placed his hand over her chest, directly over her heart, and she felt the warmth of that palm pass through her wet shirt, penetrate her skin, reach something deep inside her. "I feel this," he said softly. "Your heart beating. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever felt." Angel covered his hand with hers, holding it pressed against her chest. "It beats like this for you," she admitted. "Whenever you're around, it beats like this, fast and scared and hopeful all at once." Melvin leaned in, his forehead meeting hers again, that gesture that had become theirs, their own private language of intimacy. "Angel," he murmured. And then he did something that completely took her breath away. He placed her hand over his chest so she could feel the wild beating of his own heart. "Mine too. Always for you." They stood there in the rain, hands over hearts, breaths mingling. The entire world reduced to that suspended moment of perfect, terrifying, wonderful truth. Later, when they were dry and warm in her small apartment, sharing a cup of hot chocolate because she only had one clean mug, Melvin took a strand of hair that had escaped from the towel wrapped around her head and carefully tucked it behind her ear. The gesture was so simple, so domestic, but there was something about it that made Angel's eyes burn. He looked at her like she was art, like every detail of her mattered, like he wanted to memorize this moment and keep it forever. "You have a way of looking," Angel began, her voice failing. "How?" Melvin asked gently. "That almost undoes me," she whispered, unable to look at him directly. "Like you can see right through me. Like you know all my secrets without me having to tell you." Melvin smiled, that small, devastating smile she'd learned to love. "Maybe I do see. Or maybe I'm just trying to memorize every expression, every smile, every moment, because I'm afraid I'll wake up and find out this was all a dream." "It's not a dream," Angel said firmly, taking his hand and intertwining their fingers. "It's real. We're real." And in that small, cramped apartment, with second-hand furniture and thin walls, surrounded by nothing but simplicity and sincerity, They were more real than anything Angel had ever experienced. What she didn't know was that Melvin carried a secret that would eventually shatter all of this. But for now, wrapped in blankets and unspoken promises, they had this. And it was enough. The night started innocently enough, like so many others. Angel had invited Melvin over for dinner. Nothing extravagant, just homemade pasta made with ingredients she'd gotten on sale. He showed up at her door at 7 o'clock sharp, with a bottle of cheap wine that probably cost less than $10, but which he presented as if it were a rare treasure. "For the chef," he said with an exaggerated reverence that made her laugh. "Chef is a very generous word for someone who follows YouTube recipes," Angel replied, but she accepted the wine with a smile that lit up her entire face. Her kitchen was tiny, barely big enough for 2 people without them bumping into each other with every movement. But there was something magical about the forced proximity, the way their bodies synchronized as they worked together. Melvin chopped garlic while Angel stirred the sauce. She reached for the salt and brushed his arm. He turned to grab a spoon and his hip touched hers. Every touch was electric. Every accidental brush sent waves of heat across Angel's skin, making her heart race, making her breath catch in her throat. "You're dangerously good at this," Angel commented, watching him handle the knife with surprising precision. "I have a few hidden talents," Melvin replied, and there was something in his tone, a hint of mischief, a veiled promise, that made her stomach flip. They ate at the small table that served as dining table, counter, and desk all at once. The candles Angel had lit, more out of necessity than romance, since the ceiling light had been burned out for weeks, cast dancing shadows on the walls, transforming the humble apartment into something intimate and magical. "This is the best dinner I've ever had," Melvin said, and Angel laughed. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "It's not about the food, Angel. It's about this, being here with you like this." His gaze burned her, intense and full of unspoken things. Angel felt her pulse race under his fingers, knew he could feel it, that wild, revealing beat that betrayed exactly how much he affected her. After dinner, they washed dishes together. Angel washed, Melvin dried, and the simple domesticity of the moment was so sweet it hurt. There was soap foam on her forearm, a tomato sauce stain on his shirt, and when their eyes met over the sink full of dishes, they both laughed, a light, happy sound that filled the small space. Angel handed him a wet plate, and their fingers touched under the warm water. Neither pulled their hand away immediately. They stayed like that, fingers intertwined beneath the surface, soap bubbles floating around their joined hands. "Angel," Melvin said quietly, his voice rough in a way that made every nerve in her body wake up. She looked up, water dripping from her hands, and found him looking at her with an intensity that stole the air from her lungs. He let go of the plate he was holding, placing it carefully in the sink, then took the towel and dried her hands slowly, each finger receiving individual attention, as if it were precious. When he finished, he didn't let go of her hands. Just stood there holding them, his thumbs tracing small hypnotic circles on her palms. "I should go," he said, but didn't move, didn't release her hands. "You should," Angel agreed, but didn't step back either. The space between them narrowed. She didn't know who moved first, if it was her or him or both at the same time. Suddenly they were very, very close. She could see the golden flecks in his brown eyes, could count each eyelash, could feel the warmth emanating from his body. His breath touched her face, warm, uneven, smelling faintly of the wine they'd shared. Their eyes met and locked, an entire conversation happening in silence. A question, a permission, a silent yes that made her heart race. Melvin raised his hand, fingers trembling slightly as he traced the line of her jaw. The touch was so gentle it was almost ghostly, but Angel felt like her skin was on fire where he touched her. His thumb brushed the corner of her mouth, and she couldn't contain the small gasp that escaped. "God," he murmured, "you're so beautiful, it hurts to look at you sometimes." "Melvin," she whispered, and his name on her lips sounded like a request, a plea. He leaned in, touching his forehead to hers in that gesture that had become theirs. They stayed like that for seconds that felt eternal, breaths mingling, hearts thundering in unison, the entire world reduced to the infinitesimal space between their mouths. "I need to know," Melvin said. his voice barely more than a rough whisper. "If I can kiss you, really kiss you this time. Not just a soft kiss in the park, but everything. I need to know if you want this as much as I do." Angel didn't trust her voice, so she just nodded, her eyes never leaving his. "Words, Angel," he pleaded. "I need to hear you say it." "If you don't do it right now," she replied, her voice breathless and urgent, "I'll do it myself, because I want to. God, Melvin, I want to so badly I'm shaking." That was all he needed to hear. The kiss came like something inevitable, like a tide that can't be stopped from rising. Their lips met with an urgency that took her breath away, but there was tenderness too. In the way he held her face between his hands as if she were made of glass, in the way his lips moved against hers with reverence mixed with desire. Angel melted against him, her hands rising to clutch his shoulders, needing something to keep her anchored, while the world spun wildly. The kiss deepened, tongues meeting, exploring, teasing. She could taste the wine on his lips, could feel the low groan that vibrated in his chest when she bit his lower lip gently. His hands slid to her back, pulling her closer until there was no space between their bodies. Angel could feel every hard line of him pressed against her, could feel his heat passing through the thin clothes that suddenly seemed like too many layers. They moved together, she wasn't sure how, until her back met the wall beside the refrigerator. Melvin pressed her against it, his body covering hers, and his weight was comforting and exciting at the same time. "Angel," he murmured against her lips, then kissed along her jaw, down her neck. "You drive me crazy. Completely crazy." She tilted her head back, giving him better access, her fingers tangling in his hair. When he found the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder and sucked gently, her knees almost gave out. "Bedroom," she managed to say, the word coming out as a desperate sigh. "Melvin, please." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes darkened with desire, but also full of tenderness, full of something deeper that made her heart squeeze. "Are you sure?" he asked, his hand caressing her face. "Because once we cross this line, there's no going back. And I need to know you want this as much as I do." "I've never been more sure of anything," Angel replied, taking his hand and guiding him down the small hallway to the bedroom. The bedroom was as humble as the rest of the apartment. A double bed with worn but clean sheets, a lamp that cast soft golden light, cheap curtains that didn't close completely and let the streetlight filter through. Melvin pulled her to him again, but this time the kisses were slower, more deliberate. He explored her as if he had all the time in the world, as if he wanted to memorize every inch of her skin, every sound she made, every shiver. His fingers found the buttons of her shirt, and he paused, looking into her eyes. "May I?" "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, please." He unbuttoned each button with maddening care, revealing skin inch by inch. When the shirt finally slipped from her shoulders and fell to the floor, Angel saw the way he looked at her, with absolute reverence, as if she were a work of art he had permission to touch. "You're perfect," he murmured, his fingers tracing the curve of her shoulder down her arm, making her tremble. "I'm not," Angel protested, but he silenced her with a kiss. "To me, you are," he said against her lips, "in every way that matters." It was her turn to explore, her fingers trembling as she removed his shirt. His skin was warm under her hands, muscles contracting under her touch. She traced the lines of his chest, marveling at the way he shivered, at the low sounds that escaped his throat. They moved to the bed, a tangle of limbs and kisses and whispers. Melvin laid her down as if she were precious, his body covering hers, but his weight supported on his elbows so as not to crush her. "You tell me if you need me to stop," he said, kissing the corner of her mouth, her cheek, her temple. "At any point, promise?" "I promise," Angel said, but she knew she wouldn't want him to stop. Not when every touch of his set her on fire, not when every kiss took her closer to something big and terrifying and wonderful. What came after was slow and sweet and intense, hands exploring every curve, every line, kisses scattered like promises over exposed skin. Whispers in her ear, "You're so beautiful. You make me feel whole. You're everything I didn't know I needed." When they finally joined, it was with tenderness and urgency mixed. Angel gripped his shoulders, her nails pressing lightly into his skin as he moved, creating a rhythm that seemed perfectly synchronized with the beating of their hearts. "Look at me," Melvin asked, his voice rough and strained. "I want to see you." Angel opened her eyes, meeting his, and what she saw there shattered and rebuilt her at the same time. Desire, yes, but also tenderness, passion, but also something deeper, something that seemed dangerously close to love. They moved together, climbing higher and higher until Angel felt something shatter inside her, pleasure exploding through every nerve like fireworks. She clung to him, his name a cry on her lips, and felt him follow moments later, his body trembling against hers as he buried his face in her neck. The silence afterward was profound and sacred. Melvin rolled to the side, pulling her with him until they were lying facing each other, legs intertwined, breathing still uneven. He traced lazy patterns on her back, his fingers sending pleasant shivers down her spine. Angel drew small circles on his chest, feeling the strong but slowing drumbeat of his heart under her palm. "Stay," she whispered. "Don't leave." "Never," he replied, kissing her shoulder, her neck, the curve of her jaw. "I'm never leaving, Angel. Not if it's up to me." He pulled her closer, his body wrapping around hers from behind, his fingers intertwining over her heart. They stayed like that as the night deepened, both their breathing slowly adjusting, synchronizing until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. And in that small bed, in that humble apartment, surrounded only by sincerity and unspoken promises, something changed irrevocably. They were no longer just two people getting to know each other. They were Angel and Melvin, and there was no going back. Melvin woke before Angel, as he always did. The morning light filtered through the cheap curtains, painting golden stripes across her face as she slept. He lay there for long minutes, just watching her, the way her eyelashes cast delicate shadows on her cheeks, how her lips curved slightly in a smile even during sleep, how her breathing was soft and steady. She was beautiful, but more than that, she was real, genuine. Everything he'd been searching for years without knowing he was searching, and he was lying to her. The weight of that truth squeezed his chest like a vice, making it hard to breathe. Each day that passed, the lie grew, becoming heavier, more impossible to carry. He'd started this as a test, a cynical way to find out if there was still selfless kindness in the world. But somewhere along the way, it had stopped being about testing people and become about Angel, about the way she made him laugh, about how she saw him not as Melvin Ashford, the billionaire, but just as Melvin, the man. He should have told her the truth weeks ago, should have been honest when things started getting serious, but every time he tried to form the words, they died in his throat. How could he explain without sounding like a manipulative monster? How could he make her understand that his feelings were real even if everything else was a lie? Angel stirred, her eyes blinking open. When she saw him watching her, her face lit up with a smile that shattered him. "Good morning," she murmured, her voice rough with sleep. "Good morning, beautiful," Melvin replied, kissing her forehead, trying to memorize the taste of her skin, the smell of her, cheap soap and something sweet that was uniquely Angel. She stretched like a cat, her body brushing against his under the sheets. "What time is it?" "Early," he said. "You still have time before work." Angel made a face. "I don't want to go. I want to stay here with you all day." His heart clenched. "I want that too." They had breakfast together, burnt toast and instant coffee that Angel served as if it were a feast. Melvin ate every crumb, drank every drop, knowing these moments were borrowed, that soon everything would come crashing down. "You're quiet," Angel observed, tilting her head as she studied him. "Something wrong?" "No," Melvin lied, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about how lucky I am." She blushed, that adorable pink spreading across her cheeks. "I'm the lucky one. You showed up in my life out of nowhere and changed everything." The words were like knives, each one cutting deeper, reminding him of what he was about to lose. After Angel left for work, Melvin stayed in her apartment, looking around at the small space she called home. The cracked walls she'd tried to cover with cheap posters, the second-hand furniture she'd repaired herself, the bookshelf made of stacked wooden crates, filled with used books she collected penny by penny. She deserved better than this, deserved everything, and he could give it to her, could buy her a better apartment, could make her bookstore cafe dream come true, could give her a world where she'd never have to worry about money again. But at what cost? She loved him for who he was, or for who she thought he was. The simple man with a backpack, the traveler who understood the value of small things. If she found out the truth, she'd see only the lying billionaire who'd played with her feelings. He had to tell her, had to be honest before she found out on her own. But the days passed and he kept postponing. One more week, he told himself, a few more perfect days before it all fell apart. Fate, however, had other plans. It was on a Thursday afternoon when everything crumbled. Angel was in her apartment on her day off, organizing the small stack of magazines she collected from customers who left them at the cafe. She liked cutting them up to make collages, a cheap form of art that relaxed her. That's when she saw it. A business magazine, obviously left by some executive at the Evergreen. The cover showed a man in an impeccable suit, hair perfectly styled, confident posture. And though the suit was different, though the posture was stiffer, though there was a distance in his eyes she'd never seen before, it was Melvin. Angel's hands began to shake. She looked at the caption, "Melvin Ashford, the king of luxury cafes. How the lonely billionaire is revolutionizing the hospitality industry." Billionaire. The word echoed in her mind like a broken bell. Billionaire. Not a backpacker. Not a traveler trying to save money. A billionaire. The owner of luxury cafes, the owner of the Evergreen, the owner of the cafe where she worked. She'd served coffee to her own boss without knowing, had felt sorry for him, had offered to pay for his drink. God, she'd taught him how to use coupons, had taken him to buy pretzels from street vendors, and he'd let her, had let her believe he needed her charity, her kindness, her help. Angel felt the room spin. She sat down heavily on the floor, the magazine still in her trembling hands, staring at that photo, at that stranger in a suit who was somehow the man she loved. Loved. God, she loved him, had given him everything, her heart, her body, her trust. And it was all based on a lie. How much of it had been real? The smiles, the conversations, the night they'd spent together? Had it all just been a game for him? A way for a rich, bored man to entertain himself at the expense of a naive waitress? The tears started falling, hot and furious, staining the magazine pages. She didn't try to stop them. Just sat there on the floor of her miserable apartment. The apartment he probably thought was pathetic, that he probably laughed at inside every time he visited, and let the pain come in waves. Her phone rang, his name on the screen. Melvin. She stared at it for long seconds, then declined the call, and declined again when he called back, and again, and again. Finally, a message arrived. "Angel, please. I need to talk to you. I need to explain." Explain? Explain what? How he'd lied to her for weeks? How he'd let her make a fool of herself, saving pennies, sharing her cheap wine and sale-priced food, while he probably had millions in bank accounts? Another message. "I know you found out. I should have told you. Angel, please, let me explain. Nothing I felt was a lie." But how could she believe that? How could she believe anything that came from his mouth now? She blocked his number, not because she didn't want to hear, but because she knew that if she heard his voice, if he begged, she might forgive. And she couldn't afford to be that person again, the person who believed the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it. The door knocked 2 hours later. She knew it was him before she even looked through the peephole, could feel his presence on the other side, could hear his uneven breathing. "Angel, please." His voice came muffled through the door. "Just give me 5 minutes. 5 minutes to explain, and then if you want me to leave, I will, I promise." She pressed her forehead against the door, tears streaming silently down her face. She wanted to open it. God, how she wanted to open it and let him explain, let him say the words that would make everything okay again. But she couldn't, because deep down, she knew no explanation would be enough. No excuse could erase the fact that he'd lied, that he'd let her humiliate herself, that he'd turned her most precious moments into a cruel joke. "Please," he begged again, and she could hear the tears in his voice now. "Angel, I love you. I know I messed up everything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I love you. Everything I felt was real. Every moment, every word, every touch, it was all real." She closed her eyes, biting her lip until she tasted blood to keep from sobbing out loud. "I just wanted someone to see me," Melvin continued, his voice broken and desperate. Not the money, not the power, not the name, just me. And you did that, Angel. You saw me. For the first time in years, someone really saw me. And I know I started this the wrong way, I know I should have been honest. But I was so afraid. Afraid that if you knew the truth, you'd look at me the way everyone does, like a walking wallet instead of a person. Angel slid to the floor, her back against the door, hugging her knees to her chest. On the other side, she heard the same sound, the sound of him sliding to the floor, his breathing heavy and uneven. They stayed like that, separated by inches of wood, but by miles of lies and broken trust. "I'm sorry," Melvin whispered finally. "I'm so sorry, Angel. You deserved the truth, deserved honesty, and I failed you in the worst possible way. But please, believe this if you believe nothing else. I love you, and I'll keep loving you even if you never forgive me." Angel heard his footsteps walking away, heard the building door close, and only then did she allow the sobs to come, deep and wrenching, echoing through the empty apartment. She looked at the magazine still in her hands, at the man on the cover who looked so different from the Melvin she knew, and wondered which one was real, or if either of them had been. The days after the revelation dragged on like years. Angel quit the Evergreen Café by text message. She couldn't face that place again, couldn't walk through the same hallways where she'd fallen in love with a lie. Thomas tried to convince her to stay, offered her a raise, better hours, but she refused everything. How could she work there knowing that every cup she served, every table she cleaned, was under the invisible gaze of the man who'd betrayed her? She got a job at a small neighborhood cafe 6 blocks away, a place called Bean There, with mismatched tables and peeling walls, as different from the Evergreen as possible. The pay was lower, the tips worse, but at least there she could breathe without feeling the weight of disappointment crushing her chest. But Melvin found her anyway. On the first day, she saw him through the window, standing across the street just watching. He didn't come in, didn't try to talk to her, just stood there with that ridiculous backpack still on his shoulders, and looked at her as if he were memorizing every detail before she disappeared forever. Angel turned her back, pretending not to have seen, but her hands shook so badly she spilled coffee all over the counter. "Are you okay?" asked Maya, her new co-worker, a woman in her early 50s with graying hair and kind eyes. "I'm fine," Angel lied, wiping up the spilled coffee with movements that were too abrupt. On the second day, he came back. This time, he came in. Angel's heart stopped when she heard the door chime, when she saw that familiar figure walking toward the counter. She wanted to run, wanted to hide in the storage room and never come out, but her feet were rooted to the floor. "Hi," Melvin said quietly, and his voice, God, his voice still did terrible things to her heart. "What do you want?" Angel asked, keeping her eyes fixed on the counter, refusing to look at him. "Coffee. Americano. To go." She made the drink in silence, her hands somehow remembering the movements even though her mind was screaming. When she placed the cup in front of him, he slid a $20 bill across the counter. "Coffee costs $2.50, Angel said, her voice flat. "I know. Keep the change." "I don't want your charity," she spat the words, finally meeting his eyes. It was a mistake. Because he looked destroyed, deep dark circles, unshaven, a sadness in his eyes that almost made her cave. "It's not charity," Melvin said calmly. "It's a tip, for an excellent waitress." He took the coffee and left before she could respond. This became their routine. Every day at 3:15, because of course it would be at that time, their time, Melvin would come in, order coffee, leave an excessive tip, and leave. Never tried to talk beyond the order, never begged or apologized, just existed there, a silent reminder of everything she'd lost. And every night Angel would find a napkin in the bag with her tips, always with a single sentence written on it. "When you're ready, I'll be here. Your smile is still the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I miss you with every breath. The coffee here is terrible, but I'd keep drinking it forever if it meant seeing you." Angel kept every napkin. She told herself it was to laugh at later, to remember how pathetic he was, but really it was because each word made her heart squeeze, because even angry, even hurt, she still felt that impossible pull toward him. Maya noticed, of course. It was hard not to notice when the same man came every day, looked at Angel like she was the sun, and left without trying anything beyond being present. "That's him?" Maya asked one slow afternoon, tilting her head toward Melvin, who sat at a corner table, his untouched coffee cooling in front of him while he pretended to read a book. "Him who?" Angel asked, but knew it was useless to pretend. "The man who broke your heart, or whose heart you broke. Hard to tell which." "Both," Angel admitted quietly. "He lied to me, made me believe he was someone he wasn't." "And you still love him," Maya observed. It wasn't a question. Angel felt tears prick her eyes. "I shouldn't." "Love doesn't care about should or shouldn't, honey. It just is." Maya squeezed her shoulder gently. "The question is, can you forgive? Not for him, but for you. Because carrying this anger is eating you up inside." Angel looked at Melvin across the cafe. He'd lifted his eyes from the book and was watching her, and when their gazes met, she saw everything there: remorse, longing, love, pain. A perfect mirror of everything she herself was feeling. She looked away first, returning to work, but Maya's words echoed in her mind. That night, alone in her apartment, Angel spread all the napkins on her bed. There were dozens now, each with a different message, each one a small window into his heart. "You taught me that luxury isn't in what we have, but in how we treat people. I woke up today and for a second forgot you weren't here. Then I remembered and it hurt all over again. I would sell everything, every penny, every property, every stock, if it meant having you back. You deserved the truth, deserved honesty, and I failed. But my feelings, those were always real." Angel picked up that last one, her fingers tracing the handwritten words. His handwriting was beautiful, firm but with small irregularities that revealed the emotion behind each letter. She wanted to hate him. God, how she wanted to stay angry, stay hurt, stay safe behind the walls she'd built around her heart. But the truth she'd been avoiding facing, was that the anger was fading, being replaced by something worse: longing. A longing so deep it physically hurt, that made her wake up in the middle of the night reaching for him, that turned even the simplest tasks into reminders of what she'd lost. She missed the conversations, the laughter, the way he looked at her like she was extraordinary, the feeling of their hands intertwined, the weight of him beside her in bed. She missed him, the real man behind the lie, because she had seen that man too, right? In the vulnerabilities he'd shared, in the way he listened to her stories like they were precious, in the way he held her after they made love, like she was something sacred he was afraid of losing. Maybe Maya was right. Maybe holding on to this anger was hurting her more than it was hurting him. The next morning, when Melvin walked into the cafe at exactly 3:15, Angel was ready. She'd practiced in the mirror, had rehearsed the words hundreds of times, but when he approached the counter, everything she'd planned to say evaporated. "Sit," she said simply, gesturing to a table in the back, away from the other customers. Melvin froze, surprise and hope warring on his face. "Angel—" "Please," she interrupted, "just sit. We need to talk." He obeyed immediately, walking to the table like a man going to his own execution, nervous, hopeful, terrified. Angel made 2 coffees, both the way he liked them because even angry, even hurt, she'd memorized this, and brought them to the table. Her hands trembled as she set down the cups. She sat across from him, and for long moments neither spoke, just looked at their coffees, at the table, at anywhere except each other. It was Melvin who finally broke the silence. "I don't expect forgiveness," he began, his voice hoarse. "I don't deserve it. But you deserve the whole truth, and I should have given you that from the start. So give it to me now," Angel said calmly, finally meeting his eyes. "The complete truth, no more lies." And he told her about the loneliness of being Melvin Ashford, about how people saw him only as a name, a bank account, a means to an end, about how he'd started testing the evergreen in disguise, wanting to see if his staff treated regular people well, about how when she offered that first coffee, something inside him broke and rebuilt itself at the same time. "I should have told you after that first day," he admitted, tears shining in his eyes. "But then you really smiled at me, treated me like a human being, and I got scared. Scared that if you knew, that look would change, that you'd see me the way everyone sees me. So you lied." Angel said, and there was no accusation in her voice now. Just exhaustion. Just sadness. Yes. And it was the worst decision I ever made. He extended his hand across the table, stopping inches before touching hers, asking permission without words. Angel looked at that hand for long seconds, then slowly placed hers in it. The touch was like coming home and breaking apart at the same time. "I love you," Melvin whispered. "I know I have no right to say that after what I did, but it's true. I love you, Angel. Not for what you represent, not for some fantasy, but for who you are. For the kindness you carry even when the world treats you badly. For the way you see beauty in simple things. For the laugh that makes me want to be better." Angel took a deep breath, tears streaming silently down her face. "You hurt me. I know. You made me feel stupid. I know, and I'm sorry. More than words can express." She squeezed his hand. "But even so, even after everything, I still love you too, and I hate it. I hate that my heart won't listen to my head. I hate that seeing you still makes my whole world brighter." Melvin let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. "So what do we do now?" Angel wiped away tears with her free hand. Now we start over, the right way. No lies, no secrets, just us, who we really are." "I would love that," he said, lifting her hand and kissing her fingers. "I'd love to really get to know you, and let you really get to know me too." And there, in that small, imperfect cafe, surrounded by strangers and the aroma of cheap coffee, they began to heal. It wouldn't be easy. Broken trust would take time to rebuild. But maybe, just maybe, it was worth trying. Starting over, Angel discovered, was harder than starting the first time. When you meet someone new, there are no broken expectations to fix, no shattered trust to rebuild piece by piece. But with Melvin, every moment carried the weight of the past, the lies he'd told, the pain she'd felt, and paradoxically, the beautiful memories that still shone through the cracks. They started slowly. Meetings in public places, careful conversations where each word was weighed before being spoken. Melvin told her about his real life, about how he inherited his father's cafe empire at 23, about the constant pressure to maintain the legacy, about the loneliness that came with success. "People want things from me," he explained one afternoon as they walked through the park, maintaining a respectful distance between them. "Connections, money, opportunities. But nobody wants just me, the person. That guy who likes old books and gets emotional about sunsets, and who sometimes wakes up at 3 in the morning afraid he's wasting his life." Angel listened, really listened, and began to see the man behind the billionaire. Not that it excused the lies, but it helped her understand them. And understanding, she was learning, was the first step toward forgiveness. "I was lonely too," Angel admitted, stopping in front of a lake where ducks swam in lazy circles. Not in the same way. But working at that cafe, seeing all that wealth and privilege every day, it made me feel invisible, like I was just part of the scenery, not a real person. So when you saw me, when I thought you saw me, it was powerful." Melvin turned to her, and there was pain in his eyes. "I did see you, Angel. I do see you. That part was never a lie." They stood there, looking at each other across the safe space she'd insisted on keeping, and Angel felt the walls around her heart tremble, threatening to crumble. "I want to believe that," she whispered, "but trusting again, it's scary." "I know." Melvin took a step toward her, stopping when he saw her stiffen slightly. "And I'm not asking you to trust blindly. I'm asking for a chance to prove it, day after day, word after word, action after action. Let me show you that when I say I love you, it's real. Let me show you that the man you met, that guy with the backpack who made you laugh, that's who I really am underneath everything else." Angel wanted to believe. God, how she wanted to. But the scar of betrayal was still tender, still hurt when touched. "Prove it then," she said finally. "Not with money or grand gestures. Prove it with honesty, with patience, with being present even when it's hard. Every day," Melvin promised, "for as long as you need." And he kept his word. During the following weeks, Melvin showed up, not as the billionaire, not as the empire owner, but as the man. He'd meet her after work and they'd walk, just talking. about childhood, fears, dreams, about first memories and biggest regrets, about the meaning of life and his ridiculous theories about why birds always seem to judge people. He shared parts of himself she suspected no one else knew, how he was still sometimes afraid of the dark, a legacy of being stuck in an elevator as a child, how he cried at his mother's funeral but couldn't cry at his father's, and how that inability still haunted him, how sometimes he looked at his life and didn't recognize the man he'd become, and how finding Angel had been like finding himself again. Angel, in turn, opened up about her own insecurities, about the fear of never being enough, of always struggling just to survive, about how her mother had abandoned her and her grandmother when Angel was 10, and how that had left a wound that never completely closed, about dreaming of the bookstore Café, but being so afraid of failing that she didn't even try to start. "You won't fail," Melvin said with such certainty she almost believed it, "because you have something money can't buy. Authenticity, passion, a heart that cares." It was on one of these walks 6 weeks after starting over that everything changed. They were sitting on a bench, still with space between them, still careful, when it started to rain. Not a storm, just a light, persistent drizzle that turned the city into something soft and blurred. Angel was about to suggest they find shelter when she felt something warm fall over her shoulders. It was Melvin's coat, that expensive coat he wore now that he was no longer pretending to be poor. "You'll get wet," she protested. "I don't care," he said simply, and there was so much tenderness in his eyes that her heart squeezed. They sat there in the rain, and Angel found herself watching the drops run down his face, collecting on his eyelashes, making his hair stick to his forehead. He was beautiful like this, disheveled and real and completely present. "Melvin," she began, not knowing exactly what she was going to say. He looked at her, waiting, always so patient now. "I forgive you," the words came out in a whisper, but sounded like thunder between them. "Not because what you did was right, not because it didn't hurt, but because holding on to this hurt is hurting me more than it's hurting you. And because when I look at you, I still see the man who sat in the cafe and made me feel seen. I still feel that connection. And maybe it's worth trying again." Melvin closed his eyes, his breath coming out in a shaky sigh. When he opened them again, there were tears mixed with rain on his face. "You didn't buy my heart, Melvin," Angel continued, finally saying the words she'd rehearsed hundreds of times. "You earned it. Even with the lie at the beginning, even with everything that went wrong, you earned it. And maybe that counts for something." "It counts for everything," Melvin said, his voice breaking. "Angel, you have no idea what those words mean." She extended her hand across the space between them, that space she'd maintained for weeks as protection, as a shield. "Then show me. Don't tell me. Show me." Melvin looked at her hand, then, slowly, giving her all the time in the world to change her mind, placed his in it, and when their fingers intertwined it was like circuits completing, like something broken being glued back together. He pulled her closer, slowly, carefully, always checking her face for signs of hesitation. When she didn't resist, he closed the space between them until there was no more distance, until she was safe in his arms for the first time in weeks that felt like years. Angel sank against him, breathing in that smell that was uniquely his, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her ear. It was home. Even after everything, it was still home. "I love you," Melvin murmured against her hair. "I'll spend the rest of my life showing you that you can trust that." "I know," Angel whispered back. And strangely, in that moment, she did know. She could feel it in the way he held her, not possessively, but reverently, like she was precious, like he'd learned the hardest lesson life could teach. When they finally pulled apart, both were soaked, shivering a little from the cold, but smiling in a way that lit up the grey afternoon. "Can I kiss you?" Melvin asked, and Angel loved that he asked, loved that he didn't assume, loved that every step needed her consent. "Yes," she said. "Please." "Yes." The kiss was different this time. It didn't have the desperate urgency of the first time, nor the shy exploration of their initial kisses in the park. This kiss was reconciliation. It was forgiveness. It was two broken people choosing to mend together. It was rain and tears and laughter all mixed together. It was a new beginning and a continuation at the same time. It was admitting that love wasn't perfect, that people made mistakes, but that sometimes, those mistakes could be transformed into something stronger. When they pulled apart, both were breathless, smiles plastered on their faces. "So," Melvin said, running his thumb gently across her cheek, "what do we do now?" Angel thought for a moment, then smiled, that radiant smile he'd missed so much. Now we live. Together. The right way. No secrets, no games. Just the two of us figuring out how to make this work. Together, Melvin repeated, as if tasting the word, finding it perfect. "I like that." They walked back through the wet city, hands intertwined, stopping occasionally for kisses that couldn't wait, laughing when they almost tripped because neither was paying attention to where they were going. And when they reached her apartment, that same small apartment where it had all begun, Angel opened the door and invited him in, not to recreate the night they'd shared before, just to be together, to share hot chocolate and conversation, to build something new on the foundation of what had broken. Because sometimes love meant starting over, and sometimes it meant choosing to continue even when it would be easier to give up. And as they sat together on her worn couch, fingers intertwined, future uncertain but chosen, they both knew they'd made the right choice. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would be real, and maybe that was enough. 3 months after the reconciliation, Angel woke to the smell of coffee, real coffee, not the instant kind she usually had. She blinked her eyes open and found Melvin in the tiny kitchen, standing in front of the stove wearing only sweatpants, making pancakes like he was born to do it. "Good morning, beautiful," he said without turning around, as if he could sense when she woke up. "You're going to spoil me," Angel murmured, dragging herself out of bed and wrapping her arms around his waist from behind, pressing her face against his warm back. "That's the plan," Melvin replied, turning to kiss the top of her head. "Coffee, pancakes, and I have a surprise for you." Angel stepped back, narrowing her eyes with suspicion. "What kind of surprise?" "The kind you'll like, I promise. Nothing extravagant, nothing that'll make you uncomfortable, just trust me." They'd worked hard on trust, couples therapy, Angel's insistence, where they learned to communicate without accusations, to listen without defending, to build something solid on cracked foundations. Melvin had been patient, showing up for every session, doing the work even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. "Okay," Angel said finally. "I trust you." The smile that lit up his face was worth any risk. After breakfast, he drove her, not in one of the luxury cars he owned, but in a used Honda Civic he'd bought specifically because Angel had mentioned feeling uncomfortable in overly expensive vehicles. Small gestures like this, Angel was learning, were how Melvin showed love, paying attention, remembering, adapting. They pulled up in front of an abandoned building in Brooklyn. Angel recognized the area. She'd walked past here hundreds of times, always stopping to look at that old brick structure with large windows and imagining the potential it had. "Melvin," she began, her heart racing. "What are we doing here?" He got out of the car and opened her door, taking her hand. "Remember when you told me about your dream? The bookstore cafe where everyone would be welcome?" "Yes, but this building has been for sale for 2 years. Nobody wants it because it needs so much renovation. But I looked at it and saw exactly what you described. The high ceilings for bookshelves, the large windows for natural light, enough space for mismatched tables and chairs, a fireplace in the corner." Angel looked at the building, then at Melvin, confusion and hope battling in her chest. "I don't understand." "You received a bank transfer last week," Melvin said carefully. "From the viral video someone recorded of you defending a homeless person at your cafe, remember? Those 3 minutes brought you $50,000 in donations." Angel remembered. It had been shocking. People from all over the world sending money, saying her kindness had restored their faith in humanity. She'd tried to refuse, but the donation platform didn't allow returns. "I remember, but that money," Melvin interrupted gently, "is legally yours. You earned it not through charity, but through being exactly who you are, and it's exactly enough for the down payment on this building." Angel's heart stopped. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying this place can be yours, not a gift from me. I didn't buy it. I just found it. negotiated a good price, arranged the paperwork. But the decision is yours, and if you say yes, we'll renovate it together. I carry boxes, you choose the colors. You decide every book, every table, every detail. I just help, as a partner, as an equal. Tears began streaming down Angel's face. Melvin, I can't accept. You're not accepting anything from me except information and labor, he said firmly, taking both her hands. This dream, it's yours. It always was. I just want to be by your side while you build it. If you'll let me. Angel looked at the building, at that old, forgotten structure that was just waiting to become something beautiful, and saw everything. Saw the shelves that would fill with stories, saw the tables where people would sit and talk, saw the sign that would say, "Everyone is welcome here," saw her future. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, yes. Let's do this. Melvin spun her in the air, both laughing and crying at the same time. And when he set her back down, he kissed her with so much joy she felt it shine through every cell of her body. The next months were a beautiful madness of hard work and dreams becoming reality. They worked on the building every day after Angel finished her shift at being there. Melvin would show up in a suit, straight from important meetings, change into old clothes, and stand side by side with her sanding wood, painting walls, fixing plumbing that had seen better days. He didn't try to dominate or take over. When Angel said she wanted the walls sage green instead of white, he bought sage green paint. When she insisted on buying furniture from thrift stores instead of new, he spent entire weekends with her treasure hunting in second-hand shops. This table, Angel said one afternoon, running her hand over a scratched oak table that had seen better days, has history. See these marks? Someone lived around it. Ate, laughed, loved. That's what I want. Furniture with soul. Then that's what we'll have, Melvin agreed, helping her load the table into the rented truck. There were moments of pure joy, like when Angel found an old bookshelf from a library that was closing, or when Melvin figured out how to fix the fireplace that every contractor said was impossible. There were moments of frustration, plumbing that leaked at 3 in the morning, book deliveries that arrived half wrong, city permits that took weeks to process. But through it all, they worked together. When Angel felt overwhelmed, Melvin held her until the anxiety passed. When Melvin got frustrated with his own incompetence at manual labor, because billionaires rarely learn how to use hammers properly, Angel laughed and showed him again, patiently, without judgment. One night, exhausted after 12 hours of work, they sat on the floor of what would become the cafe area, eating cold pizza straight from the box. "Look at what we did," Angel said quietly, looking around at the now painted walls, the partially installed shelves, the floors they'd spent days sanding and varnishing. Melvin followed her gaze, then looked back at her. "No. Look at what you did. This is your dream, Angel. I just had the honor of helping build it." "No," she corrected, taking his hand, stained with paint and honestly earned calluses. This is ours now. My dream. Our achievement." He kissed her fingers, each one individually. I liked the sound of that. There was a moment a few weeks before opening that Angel would keep forever. She was organizing books when she heard a strange noise. Turning around, she found Melvin standing in the middle of the room, covered in flour from head to toe. "What happened to you?" she asked, trying not to laugh. "I was testing the scone recipe," he admitted, looking absolutely miserable. "I thought I could contribute by doing some baking. But apparently I confused tablespoons with cups and," he gestured to himself, "flour explosion." Angel couldn't hold it in. She laughed until her ribs hurt, until tears streamed down her face, until she was doubled over with the force of it. And Melvin, instead of being offended, started laughing too. Soon they were both hysterical, him covered in flour, her barely able to breathe, and it was perfect. It was messy and ridiculous, and absolutely perfect. "Come here," Angel finally managed to say, pulling him close despite the flour. "You're a disaster." "I'm your disaster," Melvin corrected, kissing her and leaving flour marks on her face. "Yes," she agreed, smiling against his lips. "You are." 3 weeks before the grand opening, Angel was putting the finishing touches, choosing which books would go on which shelves, testing different table arrangements, when Melvin came in carrying something large, covered with a cloth. "Another surprise?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "The last one, I promise, at least for this week." He placed the covered thing near the entrance and removed the cloth with a flourish. It was a carved wooden sign, beautiful in its simplicity, Angel's Books and Brew in elegant letters, and underneath, engraved in smaller letters, "Luxury is in how we treat people, not in what we have." Angel felt tears prick her eyes. "It's perfect." "You're perfect," Melvin corrected. "This is just wood." She looked at him. This man who had come into her life as a lie and become the most beautiful truth she knew. This man who sanded floors beside her, who made disastrous scones, who held her when she was scared and celebrated when she was triumphant. "I love you," she said, "for all of this, for seeing me, for letting me lead, for being my real partner. Always," Melvin promised, pulling her into a hug. "In every adventure, every challenge, every dream. I'm by your side. Not in front, not behind, side by side." "Side by side," Angel repeated, and it sounded like vows. It sounded like forever. And as they stood there in the middle of her dream, their dream, made real, surrounded by books and promises and infinite possibilities, Angel knew she'd found something no money could buy. She'd found a partner, an equal, a love built on honesty and hard work, and choosing each other every day. And that was worth more than all the empires in the world. The morning of the grand opening dawned clear and cold, the kind of autumn day in New York where the sky is so blue, it hurts to look directly at it. Angel woke early, nerves dancing in her stomach like butterflies trapped in a jar. Beside her, Melvin slept soundly, one arm thrown over her protectively even in sleep. She watched him for a moment, the way his eyelashes cast shadows on his cheeks, how his breathing was deep and steady, how even sleeping he seemed to be smiling slightly. 3 months of building the cafe together had left them exhausted, but also closer than Angel ever imagined possible. "I can feel you watching me," Melvin murmured without opening his eyes, his smile widening. "I wasn't watching. I was admiring. It's different." He opened one eye. "Nervous about today?" "Terrified," Angel admitted. "What if nobody comes? What if people hate it? What if I built all this and—" Melvin silenced her with a kiss. "Then we'll have the emptiest, most perfect bookstore cafe in all of New York, and I'll spend every day reading books and drinking your terrible coffee and being the happiest customer in the world." "My coffee isn't terrible," Angel protested, lightly swatting his chest. "It's awful," he said with a grin, "but it's your awful coffee, so it's my favorite." They spent the morning in final preparation. Angel organized and reorganized books for the 5th time. Melvin checked the coffee machine, tested the lights, made sure each table had its candle. Maya showed up early to help. She'd quit Bean there to become Angel's first official employee, and brought with her a maternal energy that calmed everyone's nerves. "Breathe, honey," Maya said, adjusting Angel's apron. "You built something special here. People will feel it the moment they walk in." At 10 in the morning, Angel opened the doors. For the first 5 minutes, nobody came in. Angel felt panic rising. Maybe the location was bad. Maybe the marketing insufficient. Maybe... Then she saw them. A line of people snaking around the block. "Melvin," she whispered, grabbing his arm, "are you seeing this?" He smiled, but there were tears in his eyes. "I told you they'd come." The first customer was an elderly woman with a kind smile and arthritic hands. "I read about you online," she said, "about how you defended that homeless person. We need more places like this. More people like you." Angel made her coffee with hands trembling from emotion and gratitude. And when the woman sat in one of the worn armchairs with a poetry book, Angel knew in the depths of her soul, that she'd created exactly what the world needed. The day passed in a blur of smiling faces, coffee orders, conversations about books. Students came to do homework. Freelancers set up temporary offices. Mothers brought children for story time that Angel improvised by the fireplace. And through it all, Melvin was there. Not managing, not supervising, but helping. Carrying trays, cleaning tables, smiling at customers as if this were the best day of his life. Because it was. 6 months later, Angel woke to Melvin making coffee, a routine that had become sacred between them. But this time something was different. There was a small blue velvet box beside her cup. Her heart stopped. "Melvin, before you say anything," he interrupted, coming to sit beside her, taking her hands, "I need you to know this isn't about money or grand gestures. It's not about the ring, which, by the way, belonged to my grandmother and is the only piece of jewelry that really matters to me. This is about wanting to spend every morning for the rest of my life making bad coffee for you. It's about wanting to build more dreams together. It's about choosing you every day, forever." Angel was crying before he even opened the box. The ring was simple, a small stone in antique gold, nothing ostentatious, nothing that screamed wealth. It was perfect. "Angel," Melvin said, his voice trembling, "you taught me what really matters. You showed me that luxury isn't in what we have, but in how we treat people. You made me want to be better, do better, live better. And I can't imagine a single day for the rest of my life without you in it." "So, he took a deep breath. "Will you marry me?" "Yes," Angel whispered, then louder. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, as if it had been made for her, and pulled her into a kiss that tasted of coffee and happy tears and promises of forever. They got married 6 months later, not in some extravagant hall or luxury resort, but at Angel's Books and Brew itself. The mismatched chairs were rearranged into rows. The fireplace was decorated with wildflowers, and the music was played by a guitarist who frequented the cafe every Tuesday to practice. Angel wore a simple dress, light lace she'd found at a thrift store that made her feel like she was floating. Daisies woven through her loose hair. Bare feet because shoes seemed too formal for what was essentially a celebration of real life. Melvin stood at the end of the improvised aisle, not in a tuxedo, but wearing the same worn sneakers he'd had on the day they met. There was a story in that, a symmetry that made Angel's heart squeeze. When she started walking toward him, accompanied by Maya, who had become like a mother to her, Angel saw everything they'd built together. The shelves they'd installed side by side, the tables they'd found at garage sales, the customers who'd become friends, who now filled the space with love and celebration. But more than anything, she saw Melvin, saw him clearly for the first time, not the backpacker, not the billionaire, but the man. The man who cried at dog commercials, who burned toast every morning but kept trying, who held her through nightmares and celebrated her victories like they were his own. When she reached him, he was crying. "You're beautiful," he whispered. "The most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "You're wearing sneakers," she replied, smiling through her own tears. "I had to." That's where it all began. The ceremony was simple. No priest, just a justice of the peace who was a regular customer and had offered to officiate. The vows were written by them, words from the heart that made more than half the guests cry. "Angel," Melvin began, his voice steady despite the tears, "you saved me. Not in the dramatic movie way, but in the real messy way. You saved me from a life where I had everything but felt nothing. You taught me to see beauty in simple things, to value kindness above all, to measure wealth not in dollars, but in moments that matter. I promise to spend my life trying to be the man you deserve. I promise to make bad coffee every morning. I promise to hold you when you're scared and celebrate when you're triumphant. I promise to be your partner, your equal, your friend, and your love. Today and every day until there are no more days." Angel could barely speak through the tears. "Melvin, when you walked into the cafe that rainy day, I thought I was just offering coffee to a stranger. But really I was offering my heart to my soulmate. You showed me it's possible to start over. That mistakes don't define who we are. Our choices after them do. You chose honesty. You chose humility. You chose to work side by side with me to build not just a business, but a life. And I choose you. I choose your horrible scones and your inability to use hammers properly. I choose your 3 a.m. nightmares and your morning smiles. I choose every version of you, imperfect, real, mine, forever." When they kissed as husband and wife, the entire cafe erupted in applause, but Angel barely heard it. All that existed was this moment, this man. This love they'd built on honesty and hard work and choosing each other every day. The reception was exactly like them. Simple, authentic, full of joy. Cheap wine in mismatched glasses. Cake made by Maya that was delicious despite being crooked. Music from a Spotify playlist that Melvin had spent weeks curating. They danced their first dance in the middle of the cafe, among books and friends and unlimited future. And when Melvin spun her under his arm, Angel laughed, that pure, free laugh of someone completely happy. "What are you thinking?" Melvin asked, pulling her back into his arms. "I'm thinking," Angel said, looking around at everything they'd created, "that we started with a free cup of coffee and somehow ended up here." "Best investment I ever made," Melvin murmured against her hair. "1 cup of coffee for the love of my life. Deal of the century." As the evening progressed, guests shared stories. They talked about how Angel's Books and Brew had become more than just a business. It had become a community, a place where homeless people could walk in and be treated with dignity, where poor students found free books discreetly marked as "take one, leave one," where loneliness was healed through conversations over coffee and shared chapters. And at the center of it all stood Angel and Melvin, no longer billionaire and waitress, no longer deceiver and deceived, but just 2 human beings who had stumbled toward love in the most imperfect and perfect way possible. Late that night, after the last guest had left and Maya had insisted on doing the cleanup alone, "You have a honeymoon to get to, now get out of here." Angel and Melvin stood alone in the cafe. "Mrs. Ashford," Melvin said, testing the name, smiling when she blushed. "Mrs. Martinez Ashford," Angel corrected. "I'm not losing my name completely." "Fair enough." He pulled her closer, swaying gently even without music. "Happy. More than words can express," Angel answered honestly. I never thought happiness like this was possible," Melvin admitted. "Never knew I could wake up every day and feel this overwhelming gratitude for just existing beside someone." They danced in silence for a few minutes, just existing together in the space they'd created. "Melvin?" "Yes?" "Thank you." He pulled back slightly to look at her. "For what?" "For walking into that cafe, for accepting my free coffee, for being honest eventually, for choosing to stay even when it would have been easier to leave, for building this with me, for loving me, the real me, not some idealized version." Melvin took her face in his hands, thumbs wiping away tears she didn't know she was shedding. "Angel, you have it all backwards. I'm the lucky one. You could have dismissed me after the lie, could have chosen someone simpler, less complicated, but you chose to forgive me, chose to give me a chance to prove I could be better, and that—" His voice broke. "That's the greatest gift anyone's ever given me." They kissed there, surrounded by books and promises, and all the possibilities the future held, and when they finally pulled apart, both were smiling through tears. "Should we go home?" Melvin asked. Angel looked around, at the cafe that was theirs, at the life they'd built, at the future that shone so brightly ahead. "We already are," she said softly. "Wherever we are together, that's home." And as they locked up the cafe that night, hands intertwined, wedding bands gleaming under the streetlights, they both knew a fundamental truth. True luxury wasn't in mansions or bank accounts. It was in how you treated people. It was in loving someone completely, flaws and all. It was in building something beautiful from imperfect beginnings. And as they walked together through the streets of New York, 2 hearts beating as one, they carried that truth like the treasure it was. Because some loves are born perfect. But the best loves? The best loves are built, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. And this love was worth every imperfect moment it took to create it. Angel and Melvin proved that true luxury was never in the things we own, but in the way we choose to love. He walked into that cafe as a billionaire in disguise, testing humanity. She welcomed him with a heart that knew no boundaries between rich and poor. She only saw souls, and from that unlikely collision something rare was born, a love that survived the lie because the truth behind it was too strong to die. They learned that starting over requires more courage than never starting at all. That forgiveness isn't forgetting, but choosing to build something new on the ruins of what broke. And that the best dreams aren't the ones we achieve alone, but the ones we build side by side with those we love. In the end, Angel didn't need a billionaire, and Melvin didn't need someone who saw him as one. They just needed each other, imperfect, real, and willing to choose love every day. And maybe that's the lesson we all carry, that true love doesn't find us perfect, it finds us willing to be real. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and become a member to get early access to upcoming stories. And if you felt it was really worth listening to, also click the Super Thanks button. Your gesture makes all the difference and helps us keep bringing stories that move you. And don't forget to comment where you're listening from. I'd love to know where this story reached.